Okay, it looks like we have a quorum. I'm going to start sharing my screen.
Say here. I'll start with, actually I didn't see Alex yet, but is Alex Park here yet? No. Skip over Alex. So Diane Schwilke.
I'm here. Good morning.
Right. Jordan Storhaug.
Good morning.
Nancy Lee.
Good morning.
Leah Marcotte.
Here, good morning.
Morning. Susan Flanabow.
Here.
Catherine Brown.
Here, good morning.
Morning, everybody. And I believe Connie Nguyen was trying to log back in, but having some technical difficulties. And then and Alex Park will expect to be joining us. Healthcare Authority.
He's having some problems with audio.
Okay. We'll go to the HCA members, starting with Lita Vasquez.
Here.
And Donna Sullivan.
She's here. She did have audio, so.
There, okay. Ryan Pistoresi. Luke Dearden. It's okay, and I'm sorry if I don't give people enough time to unmute. Luke Dearden. Amy Irwin.
Hey, this is Amy.
Amy. Joey Zarate. Ryan Takatomo. Marissa Tabile. Here. Dr. Chris Chen. And Dr. Teresa Fotinos. And I'm sorry, I'm going off the December attendee list, so I believe they may not be present at this meeting. Our Magellan Medicaid Administration member is Umang Patel.
Present.
And if we have, I don't know, do we have a DUR presenter today, Ida? Brittany?
We do not. This is only DUR, no PNC presentations.
And then Managed Care Organization representatives, Greg Seamus with Molina. Heidi Goodrich with Molina. Petra Eichelsdorfer with United.
I'm here. This is Petra.
Hi, Petra. And Catherine Vu with Community Health Plan. Okay. If I've missed anyone on the attendee list, let us know. I'm going to hand it over to Lita for meeting details.
Hi, I'm Lita.
This is Ryan Takachama. I'm just letting you know I'm here. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, I'm Lita Vasquez. The committee and the MCO representatives have been added as organizers. You can mute and unmute yourself. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking to limit the background noise. Please share your camera when you are talking or when you're presenting. Otherwise, you can turn your camera off. For stakeholder participation, the chair will first read the list of stakeholder names who pre-registered. I will unmute you. You'll have 3 minutes. After, the chair will ask if there are any other stakeholders. You can use the raise hand icon, and I will call on you and unmute you, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. The meeting is being recorded, so please state your name every time you speak. Thank you. Umang, I will turn it over to you. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I do have an announcement. This is Connie Nguyen's last meeting. So I want to thank you, Connie, for your time as the committee member, and we're going to miss working with you.
This is Jenny Bucola. I just want to add, yes, we've definitely missed working with you, Connie. We wish you good luck in your next steps.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to miss everybody. I've had such a wonderful time on this board. I've learned so much, and just being able to collaborate with every one of you has been kind of like the highlight of my career thus far. So, and I really am very sad to leave. I'm literally, it is actually starting to tear up. So But yeah, thank you.
We'll keep in touch.
Again, this is Ginny Bucola, and I think we're ready to go then. I see that Umang's slides are up. Our first topic is antibiotics, aminoglycosides inhaled, and monobactams inhaled with Umang. So I'll turn it over to you, Umang.
Perfect. Thank you very much. On the next slide here, just to give the committee a quick recap, we do kind of go over the disease states, the new medications or new guidelines that may have come out in the last year or so. Anything prior to that, I try not to keep in the slides. They may be in the appendices for the committee's leisure. On the next slide here, so we'll be going over a little bit of, there are two different topics, there are two different classes, but one topic. So I will kind of bundle them up together. We have antibiotics, so inhaled aminoglycosides and monobactams, along with cystic fibrosis respiratory agents as well. On the next slide here, a little background. So cystic fibrosis is a serious autosomal recessive multi-organ disorder that affects approximately 31,000 children and adults in the US and is the most common fatal genetic disease in Caucasians. The median survival in patients is about 48 years of age, with 80% of patients reaching adulthood. Children are anticipated to live approximately 40 years of age with current treatments. And in 2018, adults comprised approximately 55% of the population, while in 1988, they comprised about 31%. Mutations lead to the disease of the exocrine gland function, resulting in the formation of this thick mucus buildup in the lungs, digestive tract, and other parts of the body. So the transmembrane, the CFTR, is essentially a regulator that functions as a chloride channel. And the mutations in said CFTR cause essentially abnormal chloride transport across the epithelial cells on the mucosal surfaces. So the goals for cystic fibrosis are: 1, to maintain lung function by controlling infection and clearing mucus in the airway; 2, to maintain appropriate growth by providing nutritional support. That can be things such as enzymes, minerals, and multivitamins; and 3, to manage disease complications, such as insulin therapy in patients who may develop diabetes. On the next slide here, in terms of guidelines, there are no new changes in guidelines. This is just here for completeness sake, so I won't go through it in depth, but the guidelines, as I mentioned, the treatments are to maintain lung function by controlling infection, the mucus, and nutritional support. And then the CFTRs are the newest, and I say that in a relative term to the entire class, are the newest class of medications available for the disease and improve chloride ion transport abnormalities. And again, the guidelines are from 2013 and 2014, so I will not go over them. They're just here for the committee's reference. On the next slide, so in the last year, some new information that may have come out. For Kalydeco, in August 2020, the FDA expanded indications for the treatment of cystic fibrosis in patients aged 4 to less than 6 months of age, weighing 5 kilograms or greater, who have one or more mutations in the CFTR gene that is responsive to ivacaftor based on clinical and or in vitro assay data. Previously, this was only 6 months or greater. So they've expanded the age in the indication. As you can see, the dosage is, as I mentioned, weight and age-based, and nothing has changed in the availability here as well. Again, to remind the committee, I usually try to bold whatever is new in these new medications, formulations, indications, or guidelines. And so if there's something that is not bolded and others are, that is why. Next slide. And that is all I have for the cystic fibrosis bundle in terms of new information. Any questions from the committee that I can take?
This is Lita. I'm just having a technical problem here with the slides advancing.
This is Ginny, and are we, sorry, just trying to follow. Lita, are we good on, did we get to look at all of Umang's slides?
Yeah, that was it. So if the committee has any questions.
Okay, any questions, committee members? All right, we have one stakeholder, Daniel Garbawi with INSET Incorporated. Are you on the line?
Daniel, I show that you are also self-muted.
How about now?
I can hear you now. So thank you, Daniel. Can you just go ahead and give us your full name and your affiliation? Let us know what your relationship is to your company. And then when you're ready to go, you'll have 3 minutes to speak with us. Thanks.
Certainly. Yeah, thank you. My name is Daniel Garbawi. I am a pharmacist and medical science liaison at Insmed, and I serve the Western United States.
You are free to go.
Wonderful. So thank you for the opportunity to just give a brief overview of ARIKAYCE, the proprietary name for amikacin liposome inhalation suspension. ARIKAYCE is the only FDA-approved therapy indicated for the treatment of refractory Mycobacterium avium complex, or MAC, lung disease, as part of a combination drug regimen for adults with limited or no alternative treatment options. The use of ARIKAYCE is not recommended for patients with non-refractory MAC lung disease. ARIKAYCE is an inhaled, once-daily formulation of amikacin, and Insmed's Pulmovance liposomal technology is what enables delivery of amikacin directly to the lungs, where it's taken up by lung macrophages where the infective organism resides. This approach is designed to deliver ARIKAYCE to the site of infection while limiting systemic exposure. ARIKAYCE received accelerated approval, and its clinical benefits not yet established. ARIKAYCE has a box warning for increased risk of respiratory adverse reactions, including hypersensitivity pneumonitis, hemoptysis, bronchospasm, and exacerbation of underlying pulmonary disease that have led to hospitalization in some cases. Other warnings include ototoxicity, nephrotoxicity, use in patients with neuromuscular blockade, anaphylaxis and hypersensitivity reactions, and risk for embryo-fetal toxicity. ARIKAYCE is contraindicated in patients with a known hypersensitivity to any aminoglycoside. The most common adverse reactions in patients with refractory MAC lung disease include, but are not limited to, dysphonia, cough, bronchospasm, hemoptysis, musculoskeletal pain, and upper airway irritation. Efficacy was evaluated in the phase 3 CONVERT trial, in which the proportion of patients with refractory MAC lung disease achieved culture conversion, the microbiological goal of therapy, and it was significantly greater for ARIKAYCE plus background regimen arm compared with the multi-drug background regimen arm alone, at a rate of 29% versus 8.9% respectively. Of those receiving ARIKAYCE plus background regimen in the overall study population, 18.3%, or 41 of the 224, achieved culture conversion by month 6 and had sustained sputum culture conversion for up to 12 months of treatment, compared to 2.7%, or 3 of the 112, of patients receiving background regimen alone, at a p-value of less than 0.0001. At 3 months after the completion of treatment, 16.1% of patients, or 36 of the 224 patients in CONVERT who had received ARIKAYCE plus background regimen, maintained durable culture conversion, compared to no patients who had received background regimen alone. And again, the p-value of less than 0.0001. ARIKAYCE is administered using only the Lamira nebulizer system at a dose of 590 milligrams once daily, and a 28 vial kit of ARIKAYCE along with 1 Lamira nebulizer kit is provided. Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks very much. Committee members, do you have any questions for Daniel? Okay. I wanted to clarify, I don't see any other stakeholders listed for this topic, but I do see a message, Lita, from sirivate with cystic fibrosis research. I didn't know if
Yeah, I have Siri down for the next topic. There's 2 hands raised. Siri, I'm just gonna unmute you really quick to see. Hi, Siri.
Hi, thank you, Lita. I was not speaking to the antibiotics specifically, so if it's the next group for cystic fibrosis, the modulators, then I'd love to speak.
Okay.
Great. I see her listed there in the next group.
Okay, so let me get to the hands. We have Helene Gregory. You are unmuted.
Yes, good afternoon. I also work for INSMED in the market access group. And the question I have is, I hear that there's no further questions for Daniel at the moment. Can we disconnect, or would you like us to be available throughout the meeting? And or if anything, I guess if any other issue were to come up, I guess a way to communicate with us, how would you like us to manage through that?
It's a good question.
This is Lita Vasquez. If this is the only drug class that you wanted to speak on, then you can log off the meeting. If there's any other questions, we can always, I don't know, email you or something, but usually now would be the time the committee would ask you questions.
Okay, perfect. And then that being the case, unless anybody has any other questions to ask Daniel or myself, then I think we'll proceed to disconnect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I think the committee then can move to the motion.
Yes, let me bring that up. Let me know if I'm flipping too fast.
This is Jenny. It seems good. Is everybody else okay with the speed? Yeah, nodding, yeah. Okay.
This is Nancy. All products listed in the drug class on slide 2 are considered safe and efficacious for their medically accepted indications and are eligible for preferred status and grandfathering at the discretion of HCA. Products in this class may require prior authorization to determine medical necessity. All non-preferred products require a trial of 2 preferred products with the same indication before non-preferred drug will be authorized unless contraindicated, not clinically appropriate, or only one product is preferred.
This is Constance Wynn, I second.
This is Jenny Bucola. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? And the motion carries. Thanks, committee. We'll go back to Among for respiratory agents, specifically cystic fibrosis agents.
Perfect, great.
Umang, is this
So the next
slide?
we should be on anti-coag. So I did want to ask cystic fibrosis, since there was 2 different classes. There was the inhaled antibiotics and the CFTR agents. I covered them both, but I didn't know if the committee needed to make 2 different motions there.
I'm confused. Marissa?
Hey, Lita, this is Marissa. Yeah, there's 2 different motions because they're in 2 different drug classes. So there's a slide for the cystic fibrosis agents. So there just needs to be a motion for that.
Okay, then we have different stakeholders. So these are listed as 2 different topics on the agenda.
Okay.
So we have different stakeholders.
Okay, so we'll go back then. We'll just loop back to, or step down on the agenda to our list of cystic fibrosis stakeholders. Is that correct?
It sounds like it.
Okay. So our cystic fibrosis stakeholders are in the following order: Lisa Allen with Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Lisa is going to be speaking on 4 products, so she'll have 10 minutes. And then after Lisa, we have Devin Wakefield, and then we have sirivate with cystic fibrosis research. So Lisa, are you ready to go?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Oh, there she is, great.
Yeah, great. I can hear you. Just go ahead and To start yourself off, give us your name and your affiliation, and then you'll have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Lisa Allen. I'm with Medical Affairs at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Thank you for this opportunity to provide public testimony on behalf of our cystic fibrosis transmembrane conductance regulator modulators. CFTR modulators are the only cystic fibrosis medicines that work by targeting the underlying cause of CF, which is the defect in the CFTR protein, as Umang described. There are currently 4 CFTR modulators approved for treatment of CF based on age and genotype: Trikafta, Symdeko, Orkambi, and Kalydeco. Today, I will be focusing on the recent label expansions for Trikafta, Symdeko, and Kalydeco. As Umang mentioned, on September 25th of last year, the FDA expanded the age indication for Kalydeco to include eligible patients with CF aged 4 months to less than 6 months to the label. With this approval, up to approximately 50 patients between 4 months to less than 6 months old were newly eligible for Kalydeco in the United States. Most recently, on December 21st of last year, the FDA approved additional CFTR mutations to the labels for 3 of our medicines: Trikafta, Symdeko, and Kalydeco. These additional mutations were approved based on in vitro data from an established cell model system that we use to test rare mutations for responsiveness to CFTR modulators when clinical trials are not feasible due to low patient numbers. With the addition of these newly indicated mutations, an estimated 650 additional patients with CF are now eligible for a CFTR modulator. Excuse me. To summarize the updated indications, Trikafta is a combination of ivacaftor, a CFTR potentiator, tezacaftor, and elexacaftor, now indicated for the treatment of CF in patients 12 years of age and older who have at least one F508del mutation in the CFTR gene or a mutation in the CFTR gene that's responsive based on the in vitro data. And the full list of eligible mutations can now be found in Table 4 of the Trikafta USPI. Symdeko is indicated for the treatment of patients with CF ages 6 years and older who are homozygous for the F508del mutation or who have at least one mutation that's responsive to tezacaftor ivacaftor based on in vitro data and or clinical evidence. And the full list of eligible mutations for Symdeko can be found in Table 6 of the USPI. Kalydeco is a CFTR potentiator indicated for the treatment of CF in patients 4 months and older who have one mutation that is responsive to ivacaftor based on clinical and or in vitro assay data. And the full list of Kalydeco eligible mutations can be found in Table 3 of the Kalydeco USPI. The warnings and precautions associated with Kalydeco, Symdeko, and Orkambi have been shared with this committee previously. They are in the USPI and include important information on liver function test elevation, drug interactions with CYP3A inducers and inhibitors, and cataracts. Additionally, for Orkambi, the warning and precautions include information on use in patients with advanced liver disease, respiratory events, and the effects on blood pressure. Please refer to the full USPI for a complete list of warnings and precautions, as well as additional safety data. I would like to thank the committee for maintaining preferred access to Kalydeco, Symdeko, and Orkambi. During my final few minutes of testimony, I would like to highlight the head-to-head clinical data that support the addition of Trikafta to the preferred drug list. Trikafta has demonstrated superiority over Symdeko and Kalydeco in Phase 3 randomized controlled clinical trials. Trial 2 in the Trikafta USPI was a Symdeko active controlled trial conducted in patients aged 12 years and older homozygous for F508del, which met its primary endpoint of absolute change from baseline at week 4 in % predicted FEV1 by 10 percentage points between Trikafta compared to Symdeko. This 10 percentage point change in the FEV1 reflects the treatment effect of Trikafta on top of Symdeko treatment. Additional analyses showed improvements in lung function were consistent across all the patient subgroups analyzed. This study also met all key secondary endpoints, including a significant reduction in sweat chloride and a significant clinically meaningful increase in the CFQR respiratory domain score, which is a tool used to measure CF-specific respiratory-related patient-reported outcomes. In addition, top-line results of a phase 3 randomized controlled marketing post-marketing treatment study in patients aged 12 and older with one F508 mutation and either a gating mutation or residual function mutation were publicly announced on July 20th of last year. This study met its primary endpoint of a mean absolute within-group change of 3.7 percentage points in FEV1 from baseline through week 8. This was statistically significant with a p-value of less than 0.001. This 3.7 percentage point change in FEV1 reflects the treatment effect of Trikafta on top of Kalydeco or Symdeko. This study also met all secondary endpoints, including a statistically significant mean within-group reduction in sweat chloride. The regimen was well tolerated in general, and safety data were consistent with those that had been observed in the previous phase 3 studies with Trikafta. The safety profile of Trikafta is based on data from all 510 patients from 2 pivotal phase 3 studies. A total of 257 patients aged 12 and older received at least 1 dose of Trikafta. The warnings and precautions associated with Trikafta are provided in the full USPI and include important information on liver function test elevations, drug interactions with CYP3 inducers inhibitors, and cataracts. Elevated transaminases and bilirubin have been observed in Trikafta-treated patients with CF, so guidance around monitoring of LFTs are also recommended in the USPI. If patients experience significant elevations of their liver function test, there's also guidance for interrupting Trikafta. Co-administration with strong CYP3A inducers is not recommended, and the dose of Trikafta should be reduced when used concomitantly with moderate or strong CYP3A inhibitors. And lastly, cases of cataracts have been reported in pediatric patients treated with ivacaftor-containing regimens. Therefore, baseline and follow-up eye exams are recommended. Based on these data, I would like to respectfully ask the committee to add Trikafta to the preferred drug list. Thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Lisa. Committee members, do you have any questions for Lisa?
Alex Park here. Can I ask a question of Umang and Lisa?
Of course.
Umang, in the materials we received from Magellan, there was a head-to-head trial rapid of Trikafta and Symdeko, and I'm thinking that's the one Lisa was talking about. Lisa, is that the 4-week trial you're talking about? The head-to-head trial?
That's correct. Yes.
4 weeks. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, committee members? Okay, thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you.
Next, we have Devin Wakefield, a person living with cystic fibrosis. Devin, are you available?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Devin, just go ahead and give us your full name, and if you have any affiliations or ties to pharmaceutical companies, let us know, and then you'll have 3 minutes to talk.
Hi, yeah, my name is Devin Wakefield. I am not affiliated with any drug companies, but I do take Trikafta. And I just wanted to be here today to advocate for protecting the patient's relationship with their healthcare team and also give some more context on the value of Trikafta and other modulators in cystic fibrosis care. So I just wanted to start by saying the patient and doctor should be the ones to decide if Trikafta and other modulator drugs are right for the patient. I fear certain parts of the access policy may force unwarranted decisions. The patient and medical care should be at the forefront of making these decisions as they understand best the complex reality of CF care. In my experience, I have had with cystic fibrosis, I've had a lot of issues with my GI system, my lungs and sinuses and endocrine system. And I've been on tons of medications, and at times I've had to spend 3 hours or more each day on my health, including inhaled medication, exercise, a heck of a lot of pills to take, and keeping close watch on my diet. So with the introduction of Trikafta to my daily regimen, I've seen a lot of benefits, especially valuable during this pandemic. Pre-Trikafta, each winter I would get sick requiring IV antibiotics and hospitalization to recover. And during the late winters of 2018 and 2019, I had severe episodes of hemoptysis where I would be constantly coughing up blood during the day. And if I tried to lay down flat, it would trigger more blood that I would have to cough up. Trikafta, since its introduction in late 2019 in my care, has helped prevent this, which keeps me out of a hospital bed that someone with COVID might need. Furthermore, it also means I'm much more able to take care of myself at home, requiring less doctor visits and less risk of catching any respiratory viruses out there. So obviously Trikafta has been really helpful for maintaining my health. However, so the current cystic fibrosis DUR policy requires patients to meet certain metrics before access on Trikafta. And I think some of these add a burden to CF patients that are unwarranted. For example, the requirement that a patient must not have severe hepatic impairment. It assumes that Trikafta is not worth it if the patient has poor liver function. And while Trikafta can have some negative impacts on liver function, this is not certain. And in fact, some patients have reported improved liver function over time. I am one of those patients. Another issue I have with the policy is the requirement that the patient has. Yeah?
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're at 3 minutes, so I'll just invite you to close.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. And let me just close out by saying that patients work hard enough for their own care, and we should not be putting more obstacles in between patients and their medication. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Devin, for your testimony. Committee members, do you have any questions for Devin? Okay, thanks again. We're going to move next to Sirivate with cystic fibrosis research. Siri, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Just go ahead and introduce yourself and your affiliation, and then you'll have 3 minutes to present.
Good morning. I'm Sirivate, and I'm the Executive Director of Cystic Fibrosis Research Incorporated. So I will launch in. In addition to being the Executive Director of CFRI, Cystic Fibrosis Research, I am the mother of a young adult living with cystic fibrosis. And on behalf of CFRI and the hundreds of Washington residents impacted by CF that we serve, I want to express our sincere hope that patients with CF whose mutations make them eligible for CFTR modulators, and specifically Trikafta, will have access to this transformative therapy. CFRI is one of the largest and oldest CF organizations in the country. We're proud to support CF researchers at the University of Washington and to provide our services to those residents of Washington impacted by CF. Our board of directors and staff include renowned CF clinicians and researchers and those living with CF. We know this disease intimately and its devastating impact. I know it personally. We're also intimately aware of the unprecedented positive impact that CFTR modulators and specifically Trikafta have had on the lives of many with this debilitating disease. Those children who have access to modulators at a young age will have a chance to live a much fuller life. And while quality of life and life expectancy have improved for many, CF still remains a fatal disease. Those who are recently born and have access to the new therapies have better odds, but half the individuals who died from CF-related complications last year were under 30 years old. And as you just heard from Devin Wakefield, those who battle CF face hours of daily respiratory therapy, countless pills, and often multiple injections, IVs, and hospitalizations. And those hospitalizations are painful, isolating, yes, very expensive, and incredibly frightening, especially now. And for those with advanced lung disease, the fear of a catastrophic hemoptysis or pneumothorax is ever present. And a double lung transplant does extend life possibly, but it is not a cure, and it's fraught with its own tremendous risks. The importance of Trikafta in enhancing lung function and physical health is especially critical in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. CFTR modulators, and in particular Trikafta, have given many individuals with CF hope they'll have a better quality of life. Many on Trikafta have improved lung function, decreased dependence on insulin, fewer exacerbations, and reduced hospital stays. And of course, these positive physical impacts translate to improved mental health. On behalf of CFRI and the Washington residents living with CF we serve, I thank you in advance for following FDA-approved labeling criteria when determining your authorization steps. We hope that Trikafta will be included on the preferred drug list. We hope you'll not adopt policies that interfere with the doctor-patient relationship and create burdensome reauthorization steps that tax our already overloaded physicians and medical teams. We do worry this could lead to lapses in adherence by patients, which could have catastrophic and far more expensive implications. So again, thank you so much for facilitating access to this desperately needed therapy, and thank you for including the patient voice into your discussions.
Thank you, Siri. Committee, do you have any questions for Sirivate? Okay. All right, let's go ahead and go back to the motion for the cystic fibrosis agents.
This is Leah Marcotte. I move that all products in the respiratory agents, cystic fibrosis agents, drug class are considered safe and efficacious for their medically accepted indications and are eligible for preferred status and grandfathering at the discretion of HCA. Products in this class may require prior authorization to determine medical necessity. All non-preferred products require a trial of 2 preferred products with the same indication before a non-preferred drug will be authorized unless contraindicated, not clinically appropriate, or only one product is preferred.
This is Jordan Starhawk. I second.
This is Ginny Bucola. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. Thanks, committee. So now we will go back to Umang for anticoagulants and thrombin inhibitors.
Perfect. All right, so the next class here we have will be the anticoagulants. This is specific for the HCA subclass. It's factor Xa and thrombin inhibitors. To give a little bit of background, in terms of VTE or venous thromboembolism, it manifests as a DVT or a pulmonary embolism and is a major consequence of various surgical procedures and medical conditions. It occurs when a thrombus of cellular material binds together with fibrin strands, forms in the deep venous portion of the extremities, most commonly the legs. The exact number of patients impacted by DVT and PE is unknown, but it is estimated that these conditions affect between 300 and 600,000 Americans every year. If it's left untreated, approximately 30% of patients who develop PE will die within the first few hours of the event. Generally, the risk of VTE increases with the number of risk factors present, such as major trauma and age. And due to the risk of morbidity and fatal PE associated with DVT, prophylaxis has become the standard of care for patients at high risk for thrombosis. Now, CAD or coronary artery disease and PAD or peripheral artery disease has approximately 14 million Americans for CAD and 8.5 million over the age of 40 have PAD. Prevention and treatment of atherosclerosis focuses on modifiable risk factors. Therapy includes lifestyle changes and medical treatment of hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and diabetes. Antiplatelet medications such as aspirin, clopidogrel, prasugrel, ticagrelor, or vorapaxar are indicated for the reduction of thrombotic CV events in patients with established CAD or PAD. On the next slide here, to pivot over to AFib, atrial fibrillation is a common arrhythmia ranging in prevalence from 2% in patients under 65 years of age to 9% for those 65 or older. The prevalence is higher in men than women, and it increases with age. More than a third of patients with AFib are 80 years of age or older. Patients can have reduction in cardiac output, resulting in pooling of the blood, atrial thrombus formation, and potential systemic embolization. Ischemic stroke is the most frequent clinical manifestation of AFib-associated embolization, and AFib increases the risk of stroke fivefold. In patients with AFib, ACCP recommends measuring thromboembolism risk using the CHADS-2 VASC score, which considers risk factors such as gender, age, history of stroke, transient ischemia attack, thromboembolism, as well as a history of CHF, hypertension, diabetes, or vascular disease, defined as prior MIs, PAD, or aortic plaque. And this score ranges from 0 to 9, where 9, the higher numbers indicate higher risk. On the next slide here, we do have some guideline updates. According to the AHA and ACC, last year in 2020, they published guidelines on the diagnosis of treatment of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Notable pharmacological recommendations include the following. For symptomatic patients with left ventricular outflow tract obstruction, non-vasodilating beta blockers are recommended, but alternatives for select patients can include verapamil, diltiazem, or disopyramide. For non-obstructive hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with preserved left ventricular ejection fraction, beta blockers, verapamil, or diltiazem can be considered, are recommended, and consideration of anticoagulants as the default treatment option for patients who also have AFib independent of the CHADS-2 VASC score. And additional guidance on the use of antiarrhythmic therapy and heart failure agents was included in this update as well. Since we're focusing on anticoagulants, I didn't want to go into the weeds on that. And secondly, the ACC, the American College of Cardiology, last year published an expert consensus decision pathway on managing bleeding episodes in patients taking oral anticoagulants. It updates part of the 2017 guidelines, and it provides guidance on temporary or permanent interruption of therapy, general approaches to bleeding management, decision support for treatment with reversal agents, and indications and timing for reinstituting anticoag treatment. It does not recommend routine administration of platelets for patients on antiplatelet agents for major bleeding, and they do not recommend routine oral anticoagulant reversal for non-major bleeding, but clinicians may interrupt therapy until the patient is clinically stable and hemostasis is achieved. The next and final slide for the updated information on anticoagulants. One, there is a discontinuation for Bavixa. In May 2020, the FDA reported Portola Pharmaceuticals will be discontinuing the Bavixa capsules in the strengths of 40 milligrams and 80 milligrams. And there is a new generic that came out last year in January 2020 for apixaban, and this was the generic of Eliquis and from Mylan and Microlabs. Any questions?
Thanks, Umang.
Absolutely.
If there are no questions, we have one stakeholder, Piao Ching with Pfizer.
Good morning. My name is Piao Ching. I'm a pharmacist with our Pfizer Medical Affairs team. I'm here to provide medical information about apixaban or Eliquis in support of Pfizer's request to retain apixaban on formulary. As detailed in the prescribing information, apixaban is indicated to reduce the risk of stroke and systemic embolism in patients with non-valvular atrial fibrillation, prophylaxis and treatment of deep vein thrombosis, and pulmonary embolism. There is a box warning for premature discontinuation of any oral anticoagulant, which increases the risk of thrombotic events and spinal or epidural hematoma. The most common and most serious adverse reactions reported with apixaban were related to bleeding. The apixaban for reduction in stroke and other thromboembolic event study was the clinical trial that garnered the FDA and VAF approval. Apixaban was found to be superior in reducing stroke and systemic embolism and had fewer major bleeds than warfarin. It is the only direct oral anticoagulant in this space that has shown superiority. The other agents have shown non-inferiority to warfarin. Apixaban has demonstrated continued efficacy and safety in other retrospective analyses. In closing, I urge you to maintain apixaban on formulary, given its consistency in efficacy and safety real-world data. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ping. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, then we will go ahead and go to the motion on anticoagulants.
This is Catherine Brown. I move that all products listed in the anticoagulants Factor 10A and thrombin inhibitors oral drug class are considered safe and efficacious for their medically accepted indications and are eligible for preferred status and grandfathering at the discretion of HCA. Products in this class may require prior authorization to determine medical necessity. All non-preferred products require a trial of 2 preferred products with the same indication before a non-preferred drug will be authorized unless contraindicated, not clinically appropriate, or only one product is preferred.
This is Nancy. I second that motion.
This is Ginny. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. And we will move on to anti-diabetics. Back to you, Aman.
Perfect, thank you. So similar to cystic fibrosis, clinically, these next few subtopics, and I assume separate motions, are bundled together for clinical relevance. So I will present anti-diabetics as a whole, and this includes the amylin analogs, SGLT2 inhibitors, DPP4 and DPP4 SGLT2 inhibitor combos, DPP4 and TZD combos, GLP1 and GLP1 insulin combos as well. Please note, not all of these subclasses have updates, but since it is as a whole, I'm just going to go through all anti-diabetic agents that had clinical updates or relevancy in the last year. Alrighty, so on the next slide here, to take a step back into the disease state, it's for diabetes mellitus, it's estimated that over 34 million Americans have diabetes, of which 90 to 95% have type 2, and it's responsible for increased morbidity and mortality. Adequate glycemic control is crucial to minimize chronic microvascular and macrovascular complications. Microvascular is defined as blindness, renal dysfunction, and macro is things such as CVD. Exogenous insulin supplements, deficient levels of endogenous insulin and temporarily restores the body's ability to properly utilize carbs, fats, and proteins. Multiple insulin products are available and are used as replacement therapy in the management of both type 1 and type 2 diabetes when glycemic goals are not met with oral anti-diabetic agents. In addition to exogenous insulin, there are several pathways by which blood glucose may be regulated. The SGLT2 inhibitors, for the first subclass here, reduce renal glucose reabsorption in the proximal convoluted tubule, leading to increased urinary glucose excretion. On the next slide here, we do have the Endocrine Society 2019. They released essentially recommendations for diabetes in patients 65 years of age or older. They recommend simplified outpatient medication regimens and glycemic targets tailored to improve compliance and prevent complications such as hypoglycemia and falls, particularly in patients with cognitive impairment. First line, very similar to the other guidelines you'll see, is lifestyle modification. When pharmacological therapy is indicated, metformin in addition to lifestyle management is recommended. If the glycemic targets, again, are not attained after that, then oral and injectable therapies with low risk of hypoglycemia are suggested. The guidelines recommend management of common comorbidities in the patient, including things like hypertension, hyperlipidemia, CHF, retinopathy, neuropathy, and CKD. And additionally, SGLT2 inhibitors have been shown to reduce major adverse cardiovascular events, heart failure, and progression of CKD. Consequently, these should be prescribed early in the treatment, and due to adverse effects related to volume depletion with canagliflozin, doses should be limited to the max to 100 milligrams per day in the susceptible patients defined as the elderly. On the next slide, 2 new guideline updates from last year. The ACC published an expert consensus decision pathway for CV risk reduction in patients with type 2 diabetes. They identify opportunities to initiate an SGLT2 inhibitor or a GLP-1 agonist with demonstrated CV or renal benefits in patients with type 2. A medication from either class may be initiated in any patient, and ASCVD at the time of diagnosis of type 2 or ASCVD of any time after diagnosis, including at hospital discharge. An agent from either class can also be started in patients with type 2 diabetes without established ASCVD risk score, but are at high risk for said ASCVD. In addition, initiation of an SGLT2 inhibitor with demonstrated CV or renal benefit is recommended in patients with heart failure and or diabetic kidney disease. And a GLP-1 agonist is an alternative in patients with a GFR of less than 30 mils per minute. The KDIGO guidelines last year published its first guidelines on managing diabetes in patients with CKD. Key recommendations included patients with diabetes, hypertension, and albuminuria should be started with an ACE inhibitor or an ARB, and monitor glycemic control using an A1C in patients with diabetes and CKD. The target A1C should be less than 6.5% to less than 8% in those not on dialysis, depending on their risk for hypoglycemia. Metformin and an SGLT2 inhibitor are recommended in patients with a GFR greater than or equal to 30. And if glycemic targets are not met, then a GLP-1 agonist is recommended. On the next slide, ADA also updated last year in 2020. They updated select sections of their living standards of medical care in diabetes. For diabetes technology, an automated insulin delivery system should be considered in adults with type 1 who have the skills to use the device in order to improve the time in range and reduce A1C and hypoglycemia. These systems may also be useful to help improve glycemia in children. Regarding obesity management, ADA states that leucocerin should no longer be used as the FDA requested its market withdrawal. For pharmacological type 2 diabetes therapy, the guidelines advise to interrupt SGLT2 inhibitor therapy before scheduled surgery to avoid ketoacidosis, and this aligns with label revisions as well in said PIs. And lastly, for management of CVD in patients with type 2, the guidelines recommend to consider an SGLT2 inhibitor in patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction to reduce the risk of worsening heart failure and CV death. Okay, on the next slide, we have our first medication update. So for Invocamet and Invocamet XR, in January 2020, the FDA approved a new indication to reduce the risk of end-stage kidney disease, doubling of serum creatinine, cardiovascular death, and hospitalization for heart failure in adults with type 2 diabetes and diabetic nephropathy with albuminuria of greater than 300 mg per day. Previously, this was only approved to reduce the risk of MACE and as an adjunct to diet and exercise to improve glycemic control in type 2 diabetes. In August 2020, the FDA issued a drug safety communication to update an earlier communication regarding the risk of leg and foot amputations with canagliflozin containing medications. The update states that based on review of data from 3 new clinical trials, they have removed the box warning language from PIs of canagliflozin containing medications, and the risk of amputation remains a warning in the label. I know there's a lot on this slide. As I mentioned earlier to the committee, I've only tried to bold the updated information for this medication. And just an FYI, in case anyone's wondering why August 2020 is in a different font, that is a hyperlink. So if anyone wanted to see the FDA drug safety communication, you could just click on the hyperlink in the text and it'll take you there. On the next slide here, we have Farxiga, and in May 2020, FDA approved a new indication to reduce the risk of CV death and hospitalization for heart failure in adults with heart failure with a reduced ejection fraction, defined as an NYHA class 2 through 4. As you can see, it already had other indications for type 2 diabetes, but since this kind of bundles together, I felt it prudent to present it here. Everything else has remained the same, dosing, precautions, formulations as well. Excuse me, dosing, there's a heart failure dosing of 10 mg per day. Otherwise, everything else remains the same. On the next slide here, we have Trogardy XR. This is a triple combination, as you can see. In January 2020, FDA approved this medication. It's a combination of an SGLT2 inhibitor, empagliflozin, a DPP4 inhibitor, linagliptin, and metformin, which is a biguanide, as an adjunct to diet and exercise to improve glycemic control in adults with type 2 diabetes. The limitations here is it is not recommended for patients with type 1 or for the treatment of diabetic ketoacidosis, and it has not been studied in patients with a history of pancreatitis. There are black box warnings, as you can tell, since metformin is one of the triple combos in there. There's post-marketing cases of lactic acidosis with metformin. So clinicians do need to keep an eye on that, along with lactic acidosis, again, metformin. The dosing is individualized based on the patient's current regimen. And as you can see, there are various tablet formations in differing strengths here. Okay. On the next slide here, we have Ozempic, semaglutide. So in December 2019, FDA approved a new formulation of a new pen injector that incorporates a 3 milliliter cartridge and is designed to deliver 4 doses of 1 milligram of Ozempic. And in January 2020, FDA approved a new indication to reduce the risk of major adverse CV events, or MACE, defined as CV death, non-fatal MI, or non-fatal stroke in adults with diabetes and established CV disease. As you can see, it already had a second indication. Otherwise, the dosing and black box warnings remain the same for this it's a GLP-1 specific black box warning. And the formulation was updated now to have it be a single-use pen that delivers a 1 milligram dose per injection as well. On the next slide here, for Trulicity. In February 2020, FDA approved the new indication for the reduction in MACE as well in adults who have type 2 diabetes with established CV disease or multiple CV risk factors. It already has, as you can see, an indication for type 2 diabetes, and similar limitations of use we saw earlier has not been studied in patients with history of pancreatitis, not for treatment of type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis, and it is not for patients with pre-existing severe GI disease. Dosing, precautions, black box warnings, and formulations all remain the same, just that added indication here. Okay, on the next slide here, we have Saxenda, and this is essentially a new medication for, or excuse me, it's an expanded expansion. So FDA approved in December 2020, FDA approved this medication for pediatric patients 12 years of age or older who are 60 kilograms or greater and have an initial BMI corresponding to 30 kilograms per meter square for adults, which is classified as obese according to the BMI calculation by international cutoffs. Previously, this medication was only in adults. And so essentially this is indicated as an adjunct to reduced calorie diet and increased physical activity for chronic weight management here. The dosing, as you can see, is it is an injection and it is 0.6 mg per day for 1 week in weekly intervals. There are similar black box warnings, just like all other GLP-1 agonists. And then the formulation is an injection. Now, in terms of renal and hepatic impairment for this, for special populations, there is limited experience in patients with mild, moderate, or severe renal and hepatic impairment. On the next and final slide for this diabetic medication treatment class, there was an FDA communication. Again, the hyperlink is in the text. The FDA issued a communication stating that Januvia, Janumet, and Janumet XR are not proven to improve glycemic control in patients 10 to 17 years of age with type 2 diabetes. And this was based on results of 3 clinical trials that did not demonstrate an improvement in A1C, and labeling was updated accordingly. That is all I have for that class. I can pause there. The next subclass is insulin, and so I can take any questions from the committee. And Lita, I can pause here if the committee was going to vote on this class.
This is Ginny Umang. I wonder, well, we have stakeholders for this class, but we don't for the next class. My indication would be to go ahead and have you review the anti-diabetics insulin slides, and then to do 2 motions back to back. Does that?
This is Lita. I'm fine with that if that's how you want to do it.
Okay. But maybe since you've paused, are there any questions from the committee for Umang about the content that he just reviewed? Okay. All right, Umang, I'll turn it back.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so the next we'll pivot a little bit over to insulin. Again, I'm not going to go over background or anything like that since it all encompasses under here. There were some FDA announcements that I did want to bring to the committee's attention. So again, hyperlinks are in the text if anyone in the committee wants to direct access. But in December 2019, the FDA published a statement regarding the pathway for approval of chemically synthesized polypeptides. In March 2020, the majority of the protein products will have the potential for biosimilar and interchangeable products to increase competition through FDA approval under abbreviated pathways. However, products that are deemed, quote, chemically synthesized polypeptides are not eligible for abbreviated approval pathways utilized for biosimilar or interchangeable products. And the statement addresses how removal of this exclusion would allow for chemically synthesized follow-on insulins and other products to become approved through this abbreviated pathway. In March 2020, as part of the Biosimilars Action Plan, FDA announced that insulin and certain other biologic products have transitioned to a different regulatory pathway as of March 23rd, 2020. And in October 2020, FDA issued a communication to clarify the intent of the November 2019 revisions to labeling for insulin pens, which state that healthcare practitioners should dispense the pens to a single patient in the original sealed carton. Insulin pens are not labeled for dispensing as individual units because sealed cartons of insulin pens are intended to be dispensed to a single patient. Each carton contains a single copy of the drug's PI and instructions for use. FDA has strongly encouraged insulin pen manufacturers to consider developing smaller carton sizes to better accommodate variable insulin doses. And the FDA suggests organizations facing challenges with multiple pen cartons contact the manufacturer to express the need for smaller and single pen carton sizes. In April 2020, Lilly announced the launch of a new authorized generic for the Humalog Junior Quick Pen, which is insulin Lispro injection, 100 units per ml. Okay. On the next slide here, first medication we'll pivot over to is Fiasp. This is insulin aspart injection. So in January 2020, the FDA expanded the approval for improving glycemic control in patients with diabetes to include pediatric patients, including for the use as continuous subcutaneous insulin infusion, previously only approved in adults. Everything else remains the same. As you can imagine, for insulin, dosing is very individualized. Precautions and contraindications for all the classes of insulin will be similar. Hypokalemia, never to share pre-filled pens, and contraindications with episodes of hypoglycemia, as one can imagine. On the next slide here, we have a new medication, Lyumjev. I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. In June 2020, FDA approved this rapid-acting human insulin analog indicated to improve glycemic control in adults with diabetes. Dosing, again, very individualized. For subcutaneous injection, it is recommended to administer at the start of the meal or within 20 minutes after in adipose tissue. And for IV, it can only be administered under medical attention, supervision, as one can imagine. Identical precautions and contraindications. And as you can see for the formulations, they are multi-dose vials and quick pens as well. On the next slide here, in April 2020, Lilly announced the launch of a new authorized generic for the Humalog Mix 75-25 combo quick pen as well. Next slide here, we'll go to Basaglar. And so in December 2019, FDA approved the expanded formulation of the addition of a modified pre-filled insulin pen that can be used with connected devices, mobile applications, or other technology. And this will be a 3 milliliter single patient use Basaglar Tempo pen. And essentially this is, it's able to be connected to high tech at this point. Nothing else has really changed. Everything else in the PI remains the same. Next slide here, we have Toujeo, Solostar, and Max Solostar. And in December 2019, the FDA expanded indication to include pediatrics age 6 to 17 years of age with diabetes mellitus. Previously, it was just adults. But again, nothing else has changed here. And on the next and final slide, we have Semglee. And so in June 2020, FDA approved Semglee under the 505(b)(2) NDA pathway and is now deemed a biologic. And it is a long-acting human insulin analog indicated to improve glycemic control in adults and pediatric patients with type 1 diabetes and adults with type 2 diabetes. So again, limitations for insulins are, for this specific one, it is not recommended for treating diabetic ketoacidosis. The dosing is very individualized. Precautions, contraindications are identical. And the formulation is available as a 10 milliliter multi-dose vial or a 3 ml single patient use pre-filled pen. That is all I have for the insulins. Any questions I can take from the committee?
This is Jenny. Thanks again, Umang. Committee members, questions? Okay, so we're moving back to our prior category of anti-diabetics to hear from our stakeholders. I have 2 listed, and then I have seen a message from Shauna Purcell asking to be a 3rd stakeholder. So Shauna, just so you know that I see your name there. But we will be hearing from Anthony Wheeler with Eli Lilly, Mark Manival from Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceutical, and then Shauna Purcell. So we can start by going to Anthony. Anthony, can you hear me? Are you unmuted?
Yes, I can. How's my microphone?
It's good. So if you can just let us know your name, your affiliation, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm Anthony Wheeler, and I'm an employee of Eli Lilly and Company, which manufactures Trulicity. This is also known as dulaglutide, and it's part of the GLP-1 receptor agonist class of drugs. This was originally approved about 6 years ago as an adjunct to diet and exercise to improve glycemic control in adults with type 2 diabetes. There's a new indication that was received last year, which Umang mentioned. This is to reduce cardiovascular events in adults with type 2 diabetes who have established cardiovascular disease or multiple cardiovascular risk factors. And the one other update I wanted to provide to you that is new since your last review of Trulicity is the approval of 2 new doses. This drug has originally been available as a 0.75 or 1.5 milligram dose once per week. And Trulicity is now also available as a 3 milligram or a 4.5 milligram dose, again, once per week, and it's for additional glycemic control. These doses were studied in a trial called Award 11, where the 4.5 milligram dose demonstrated superiority to the 1.5 milligram dose in terms of A1C change and weight change from baseline. And the new doses are still delivered using the same single dose pen device, which has a hidden pre-attached needle inside, and there's no mixing or reconstitution necessary to use it. So thanks for letting me come provide these updates, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Any questions, committee members? Okay, we'll move next to Mark Manival. Are you there?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. Just introduce yourself and your affiliation, and you'll have 3 minutes to share with us. Thanks.
Great, thank you. My name is Mark Manival. I'm a pharmacist and health economics and outcomes research liaison for Boehringer Ingelheim. I'm sharing information with you today related to our SGLT2 inhibitor, Jardiance. Jardiance is currently indicated to reduce the risk of cardiovascular death in adults with type 2 diabetes and established cardiovascular disease, and as an adjunct to diet and exercise to improve glycemic control in adults with type 2 diabetes. In placebo-controlled randomized clinical trials and in non-inferiority trials of adult patients with type 2 diabetes, treatment with Jardiance reduced A1C compared with placebo, with the lower A1C observed across subgroups, including in the presence of mild to moderate renal impairment. Jardiance has demonstrated statistically significant reductions in A1C as both monotherapy and as add-on therapy. In our EMPA-REG outcome trial, a randomized double-blind parallel group study comparing the risk of experiencing a major adverse cardiovascular event between Jardiance and placebo when these were added to standard of care for adults with type 2 diabetes and established cardiovascular disease, Jardiance significantly reduced the risk of a major adverse cardiac event. The treatment effect was driven by a significant 38% reduction in the risk of cardiovascular death in subjects randomized to the 10 milligram and 25 milligram doses of Jardiance. Peer-reviewed manuscripts have been published recently showing the effects of Jardiance on risk of hospitalization for heart failure, worsening heart failure, and mortality among patients with and without type 2 diabetes. Regarding safety in clinical trials, genital mycotic infections and increased urination were seen more frequently in Jardiance versus placebo. SGLT2 inhibitors can cause intravascular volume contraction, renal impairment, and symptomatic hypotension. However, in clinical trials of Jardiance versus placebo, volume depletion occurred with the same frequency in the two groups. Jardiance is not recommended during pregnancy or while breastfeeding. We have a robust clinical trial pipeline investigating Jardiance in other disease states, and we continue to gather real-world evidence to quantify the clinical and economic outcomes associated with Jardiance across those disease states. Thank you for your time, and I and my team are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mark. Committee members, do you have any questions? Okay, we'll go next to Shauna Purcell. Shauna, are you unmuted?
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Dr. Shauna Purcell, and I have been treating type 2 diabetes exclusively for over a decade. And so I really wanted to bring to everybody's attention and add on to what Anthony had to say in regards to
I'm sorry, could you just share your affiliation and then I'll start your time? I'm sorry, I didn't get that in before you started talking.
Oh, yes, I'm a private physician in the community. So I have a diabetes type 1 and type 2 clinic, and that's basically my affiliation. So I really wanted to just bring forth more information regarding specifically Trulicity as the GLP-1 receptor agonist, and then the impact that I've seen over now 6 years using this medication. So I appreciate Anthony's comments. Thank you. I wanted to just really bring out the two higher doses, as Anthony was saying, of Trulicity, 3.0 milligrams once a week and 4.5, that has added to the arsenal of the original 0.75 and 1.5 that we had for about 5.5 years. Also in the GLP-1 receptor agonist class, Trulicity is really coming far ahead of, for example, liraglutide and Ozempic. The recent Rewind Trulicity primary prevention cardiovascular outcomes trial is important to look at. It literally reduces cardiovascular risk in primary prevention population. So these are patients with diabetes and did not have known cardiovascular disease by 12% risk reduction. which brings it further along than the other GLP-1 receptor agonists because it's the only one that has primary prevention as well as secondary prevention. So if we look at the other cardiovascular outcomes trials, for example, with the Leader and Victoza and Ozempic and Sustain, those two only have secondary prevention. And I really just want to make it clear that the ADA also suggests that after diet and exercise with A1C and a cardiovascular indication, GLP-1 receptor agonists are the next line. And Trulicity with its now 4 doses is going to be a great add-on for all of our Medicaid and Medicare patients to get better efficacy for A1C reduction. And also we were seeing some weight changes as well. The presentation showed a lot of SGLT2, which is excellent, and all of the data that it was just presented is great as far as cardiovascular and heart failure. And so those two classes really need to be emphasized, but I believe that emphasizing specific drugs such as Trulicity for the cardiovascular outcomes trials that we have, primary prevention and secondary prevention, as well as 4 doses. The 2 higher doses at 3 and 4.5 milligrams once a week is really making a huge impact on our type 2 diabetics in changing their lives, also decreasing their A1C and their further complications, which in the long run is going to help all of our type 2 diabetics. So I really want to just make sure that the information is updated, and I have a ton of experience with this. I also speak for Trulicity as well, and I would be happy to share all of my clinical data that I have at a personal level with my clinic and my patient experience. It's been wonderful. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate being a part of this wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions for Dr. Purcell? Okay, so we will then go to our 2 motions. The first are the anti-diabetics, the amylin analogs, et cetera. And then the second motion will be insulin.
This is Constance Nguyen. I move that all products listed in the drug classes on slide 9 are considered safe and efficacious for their medically accepted indications and are eligible for preferred status and grandfathering at the discretion of HCA. Products in this class may require prior authorization to determine medical necessity. All non-preferred products require a trial of 2 preferred products with the same indication before a non-preferred drug will be authorized unless contraindicated or not clinically appropriate.
This is Leah Marquette. I second that motion.
This is Ginny Bucola. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? And the motion carries. And we'll move to the next motion.
This is Nancy.
This is Alex Park. Oop. Go ahead.
I move that all products listed in the drug classes on slide 12 are considered safe and efficacious for the medically accepted indications and are eligible for preferred status and grandfathering at the discretion of HCA. Products in this class may require prior authorization to determine medical necessity. All non-preferred products require a trial of 2 preferred products with the same indication before a non-preferred drug will be authorized unless contraindicated or not clinically appropriate.
This is Alex Park. I second that motion.
This is Ginny Bucola. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? And the motion carries. And we will go back to Umang for endocrine and metabolic agents.
Alrighty. So the next topic we have are growth hormone releasing hormones for endocrine and metabolic agents. Here we see growth hormone insensitivity or insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1 deficiency, refers to a variety of disorders characterized by the resistance of growth hormone. It can be defined by deficiency in the production of growth hormone or in the peripheral action of the IGF-1 on linear growth. Severe deficiency is due to mutation of the growth hormone receptor or post-growth hormone receptor signaling. It is also characterized by the development of growth hormone inactivating antibodies in pediatric patients with growth hormone gene deletion. Patients are considered to have severe primary IGF-1 deficiency when the following criteria are met: height standard deviation score less than or equal to -3, basal IGF-1 standard deviation score less than or equal to -3, and normal or elevated growth hormone. Now with HIV lipodystrophy, soon after combination antiretroviral therapies was found effective in treating HIV-infected patients, adverse side effects from the medications were reported, including metabolic changes, morphological abnormalities, and lipodystrophy. It is found in patients on highly active antiretroviral therapy. Patients with HIV lipodystrophy were described as having loss of subcutaneous fat in limbs, face, and buttocks, and an accumulation of fat in other areas of the body, including the abdominal viscera. And patients who have increased abdominal viscera and waist circumference are at an increased risk for metabolic syndrome, CV disease, atherosclerosis, and diabetes. On the next slide here, continuing on, kind of pivoting to guidelines for severe IGF-1 deficiency growth hormone gene deletion, Increlix is the only available product approved for the indication of long-term treatment of growth failure in pediatric patients with severe primary IGF-1 deficiency or with growth hormone gene deletion with development of neutralizing antibodies to growth hormone. Patients with diagnosis that are not growth hormone deficient and will not respond well to exogenous growth hormone. And likewise, Increlix should not be used as a substitute for patients who require growth hormone therapy. It should not be used in patients with secondary forms of IGF-1 deficiency, and all thyroid and nutritional issues should be corrected prior to initiating therapy. And it should not be used for weight loss management. Now, pivoting to HIV lipodystrophy, recombinant human growth hormone has been used with success in patients with AIDS-related wasting syndrome since it has been shown to improve muscle mass. However, studies have shown that recombinant human growth hormone causes a reduction in visceral adiposity, but supraphysiological levels of IGF-1 and symptoms of excess growth hormone occurred, causing treatment cessation. Egrifta offers a specific treatment option for the reduction of excessive abdominal fat in HIV patients with lipodystrophy, as it appears to target the visceral fat compartments with little effect on subcutaneous fat or fat in the limbs. And the final slide here in this class, in terms of updates, there is a discontinuation. So for Egrifta, in May 2020, brand name product Egrifta is being discontinued by the manufacturer, which is Thera Technologies, and is being replaced with a new smaller volume formulation, Egrifta SV, which became available in December 2019 and can be stored at room temperature. And Egrifta was not available as of June 15th, 2020. Go ahead and pause there for the committee.
And this is Lita Yavaskis. I see that there is only one motion for both of these growth hormone categories. So we can stop for committee questions, but then I'll have Umang go through the next presentation before we do our stakeholders.
Okay, thanks, Lita.
Okay, there's no questions. I'll march onward. And then Magellan has these classes separated, and that's kind of why I've broken these out. So on the next slide, for human growth hormone, for somatropin, It is a 191 amino acid polypeptide hormone secreted by the anterior pituitary gland. It has important metabolic effects, including stimulation of protein synthesis and cellular uptake of amino acids. Short stature and growth deceleration are common pediatric concerns, and exogenous growth hormone is used to treat a variety of disorders in which endogenous growth hormone is insufficient to meet the needs of the patient. Growth hormone deficiency results from inadequate production of growth hormone and can produce various medical conditions dependent on age. It can be congenital or acquired in childhood or adult life, in addition to being partial or complete. In infancy and childhood, growth failure may be the major effect. Adults with growth hormone deficiency may have diminished lean body mass, poor bone density, and a number of physical and psychological manifestations. It is usually permanent and may be an isolated deficiency, or could occur in association with deficiencies of other pituitary hormones. And between 40 and 50% of childhood cancer survivors develop an endocrine disorder during their lifetime, with some developing decades following cancer treatment. According to the AACE Growth Hormone Task Force in 2019, they do not advocate use of one product over another, but they do recommend using individualized dose adjustments to improve effectiveness and minimize side effects. In terms of updates, there's a discontinuation for humatrope. In July 2020, on the next slide, Eli Lilly reported the FDA plan to discontinue one presentation of humatrope, and that's the 5 mg kit. There are specific NDC numbers here for the committee members' reference, and distribution will continue until the end of December 2020. Other humatrope presentations will continue to be available. And on the next and final slide here for growth hormones, in August 2020, FDA approved Sogroya, a human growth hormone analog indicated for the replacement of endogenous growth hormone in adults with growth hormone deficiency. In terms of precautions and indications, there is an increased risk of neoplasm. There are risks of malignancy progression in patients with active malignancy and of malignant changes of pre-existing condition. Monitor patients with pre-existing tumors for progression or recurrence. In terms of glucose intolerance and diabetes, it may decrease insulin sensitivity, particularly at higher doses. And as we just pivoted from the diabetes section, that can lead to diabetes. And it is contraindicated in patients with acute critical illness and or patients with active malignancy. As you can see, there are dosing instructions here, and the formulations are in injection form in a single patient use pre-filled syringe. There are no, in terms of special populations, there is no available data for pregnancy, and there is hepatic and renal impairment dose adjustment for moderate hepatic impairment, and it is not recommended in severe hepatic impairment. That is all I have for this subsection of growth hormones. Again, I'll pause here for the P&T committee members.
Thanks, Umang. Just a point of clarification about this is most probably for Lita. Lita, did you want us to go all the way through GI agents before we do all the motions, or shall we go?
Just a second.
Back to the stakeholder for?
No, that will be a separate motion.
Okay. All right, so we'll go then to our stakeholder, Piao Ching with Pfizer. Piao, are you unmuted?
Yes, Jeannie. Thank you again for this opportunity. My name is Piao Ching. I'm a pharmacist with Pfizer Medical Affairs team. I'm here to provide medical information about genotropin in support of Pfizer request to retain genotropin on formulary. As mentioned earlier, genotropin is a recombinant human growth hormone indicated for treatment of children with growth failure due to a growth hormone deficiency. It is also indicated for Prader-Willi syndrome, small for gestational age, Turner syndrome, idiopathic short stature, and treatment of adults with adult onset or child onset growth hormone deficiency. Genotropin is contraindicated in patients with acute critical illness, children with Prader-Willi syndrome who are severely obese or have severe respiratory impairment, active malignancy, and hypersensitivity to somatropin. The Pfizer International Growth Database and Pfizer International Metabolic Database are the largest patient databases available for patients with growth hormone disorder. Pfizer International Growth Database has collected data on 83,000 children, and Pfizer International Metabolic Database has data on 16,000 adults. Data includes patients from 30 to 50 countries and has generated over 100 publications. A longitudinal analysis of Pfizer International Growth Database found increases in the proportion of patients in a normal weight range after growth hormone treatment. Genotropin also offers patient support with the Pfizer Bridge program. The program provides comprehensive personalized patient support, including benefit verification, device training, and telephone support 24/7. In closing, Genotropin offers a wide range of indications and a patient support program from the Pfizer Bridge. With over 20 years of experience with Genotropin, we are committed to growth hormone rare diseases and urge you to retain Genotropin on formulary. I'll be happy to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Pao. Any questions from the committee? Okay, so we'll take a look at those two motions then.
This is Lita. It's actually one motion.
One motion. Thanks, Lita.
This is Susan Plattabo. I move that all products listed in the drug classes on slide 15 are considered safe and efficacious for the medically accepted indications and are eligible for preferred status and grandfathering at the discipline of HCA. Products in this class may require prior authorization to determine medical necessity. Non-preferred products require a trial of 2 preferred products with the same indication before a non-preferred drug will be authorized unless contraindicated, not clinically appropriate, or only one product is preferred.
Constance Nguyen, I second.
This is Ginny Bucola. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. Thanks, committee. We'll go back to Amang for GI agents, inflammatory bowel agents.
Perfect. For the next and final class here, we have inflammatory bowel agents. A little bit of background. Ulcerative colitis is a chronic inflammatory disease primarily affecting the colon and rectum. It affects approximately 1 million people in the United States, and the incidence continues to increase worldwide. The CDC estimates the current prevalence is at 238 per 100,000 adults. It may present at any age, but onset typically peaks between 15 and 30 years of age. And the disease is characterized by superficial infiltrates of the bowel wall by inflammatory white cells, resulting in multiple mucosal ulcerations and crypt abscesses. The predominant symptoms is diarrhea, which is usually associated with blood in the stool. Additional symptoms may include pain in the lower quadrant of the rectum, along with systemic features, including fever, malaise, and weight loss, which are more common if a greater portion of the colon is affected. The initial attack may be fulminant with bloody diarrhea, but the disease more commonly begins indolently and non-bloody diarrhea progressing to bloody diarrhea. It can present initially with any extent of anatomic involvement, ranging from disease confined to the rectum to the entire large intestine, and that's called pancolitis. And most commonly, ulcerative colitis follows a chronic intermittent course with long periods of quiescence, interspersed with acute attacks lasting weeks to months. However, a significant percentage of patients suffer a chronic continuous course. On the next slide here, we have an update to guidelines, first being by the AGA, the American Gastroenterology Association, last year. I tried breaking it down. So for moderate to severe ulcerative colitis, They consider patients with moderate to severe to be those who are dependent on or refractory to corticosteroids, exhibit ulcers upon endoscopic assessment, or are at high risk for colectomy. Long-term management can include medications of the following classes: TNF-alpha antagonists, immunomodulators. If the agent selected for inducing remission is effective, it is usually continued as maintenance therapy. The exception to this would be when corticosteroids or cyclosporin are used for induction of remission. The following agents are recommended over no treatment for adult patients with moderate to severe ulcerative colitis, listed in order of FDA approval. And we have infliximab, adalimumab, golimumab, vedolizumab, tafasitamab, and ustekinumab. In patients who are biologic naive, infliximab or vedolizumab are suggested rather than adalimumab for induction of remission. However, patients with less severe disease who value the convenience of self-administration over the relative efficacy of therapy may select adalimumab instead. For induction of remission, thiopurine monotherapy is suggested against use. However, it is suggested over no treatment for maintaining a remission. And methotrexate monotherapy is suggested against use for induction as well as maintenance of remission. The combination of TNF-alpha antagonists is suggested with thiopurines or methotrexate over biologic monotherapy or thiopurine monotherapy. Early use of biologics with or without immunomodulator therapy is suggested rather than gradual step up to these agents following failure of 5-ASA. And additional recommendations for adult outpatients with moderate to severe ulcerative colitis are provided regarding the use of tafasitamab and management of non-responders to infliximab. For patients who achieve remission with biologic agents and or immunomodulators or tafasitamab, it is suggested against continuing 5-ASA for induction and maintenance of remission. On the next slide here, the AGA 2019 guidelines, I essentially try to highlight or underline the main points here. For mild to moderate ulcerative colitis, the guidelines recommend starting standard dose of mesalamine for induction and maintenance. High dose oral mesalamine combined with rectal 5-ASA may be required for patients with suboptimal response to standard dose therapy or those with moderate or extensive disease. Oral prednisone or budesonide may be added in those refractory. Proctosigmoiditis or proctitis can be treated with topical mesalamine rather than 5-ASA. In patients with suboptimal response or intolerance to rectal mesalamine, rectal corticosteroids, such as an enema or a foam, may be used. Patients who do not respond adequately to therapies as outlined above may need to escalate to systemic corticosteroids, immunomodulators, or biologics. And the guidelines make no recommendations regarding the use of probiotics, curcumin, and FMT. While they appear to be safe, their use could delay initiation of proven efficacious treatments and potentially lead to worsening symptoms or complications. On the next slide here, I do have the final guidelines, the AAFP guidelines from 2013. Again, since this is about 8 years old now, this is here just for the committee's reference for guidelines in this class. I will not go over these in detail. And that is it in terms of updates. I will pause here for any questions from the committee.
Thanks, Umang. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Committee members, any questions before we go to the motion? Okay. I guess we're ready to take a look at that then, Lita.
This is Diane Schwelke. I move that all products in gastrointestinal agents, inflammatory bowel agents, drug class are considered safe and efficacious for their medically accepted indications and are eligible for preferred status and grandfathering at the discretion of HCA. Products in this class may require prior authorization to determine medical necessity. All non-preferred products require a trial of 2 preferred products with the same indication before a non-preferred drug will be authorized unless contraindicated, not clinically appropriate, or only one product is preferred.
Catherine Brown, I second.
This is Jenny Bucola. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any
Aye.
opposed? All right, the motion carries. It looks like we're scheduled for a break, and it's 10:40. So I would say, Lita, does it sound okay to be back at 10:50?
Sounds great.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Hi, this is Lita Ivaskis. It's 10:50. Marissa, are you on? I have made you the presenter. Great.
Hi, Lita. Yeah, I'm just trying to get the sharing all figured out, but I'm just trying to pull up the presentation here.
Great, thank you.
Okay, are we ready to get started? Should I just go ahead and jump in? Or do we
No,
have...
let's make sure we have the committee back.
Okay, just let me know when to start, Lita.
This is Ginny. Just maybe, yeah, everybody just can say hi. Let us know when you're back, and then we'll be ready to go. Marissa, this is Ginny again. Feel free to get started whenever you're ready.
Okay, sounds good. Let me just go ahead and show my screen. Okay, perfect. So good morning. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. Can you see it okay?
This is Ginny. Yeah, I can see you and the screen. Just thanks.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the next part of the meeting will be going through the Apple Health PDL archive drug classes. So the last time we went through these archive drug classes was, I think, in October of 2020. So it's been a couple of months since we presented them. This is the first time that we will be presenting pretty much the majority of what we have left on the Apple Health PDL. So just to give some background again, we do have the AHPDL fully implemented with over 430 something drug classes, which is a lot. So to help make the DUR board meetings more efficient, we have gone through the AHPDL and kind of went through and made decisions on which classes we would like to archive and which ones we would like for regular drug class review like we just did with Umang. Most, if not all, of the drug classes that we are presenting for archiving are pretty much composed largely of generic products. So there's not much change to them. So sometimes there'll be like one new product that's added to the class, but generally these classes don't have very much change to them. So it's not like there's new products constantly being added to the class. So that's kind of one of the criteria that we use for archiving. We identified about roughly over 200 and I want to say maybe 80 or 90 drug classes, maybe give or take that number that we are moving forward or presenting for archiving. So what the plan is for these archive drug classes that we will be presenting, we will just represent them we will represent them annually, and it won't really be an in-depth review kind of what Umang does. It's going to be a really high-level overview, and for the interest of time, we'll just kind of be going through any new products that might have come to the market that have been added to that class in the past 2 years. I do 2 years because we just fully implemented our AHPDL last year, so I'm trying to take into account the years of 2019 up until today. But moving forward, when I present the archive drug classes at future meetings, it'll just be classes or new products or changes that have occurred within the last year. So kind of the process of how I figured out any updates to the classes or any updates to the product is I looked on the FDA drug safety communications, so check the FDA website. I've looked at manufacturer websites, any updates to their label, any press releases that manufacturers have released, and then also looked at drugs on the drugs at FDA website lookup. So done a search of new products, kind of seeing what has gone on with their application, how it got approved, why it got approved, and use that information to list them in updates for the archive drug classes. So feel free to stop me at any point if you have any questions. Like I said, this is going to be a very high level overview. It's not going to be in depth going into any guidelines. It's just any updates to the classes, any new products that came out, any FDA warnings, that I've seen, any expanded label indications to products that are already in the drug class. So I'll go ahead and get started. We have about, I think, 216 or 15 drug classes to go through. So just bear with me. Okay. So the first, sorry, I'm just trying to move my screen. I apologize. Okay, there we go. Okay, so any drug classes that have had any updates, I will be calling out specifically, but the ones that don't have any updates, you'll just see here like listed on the slide. I'll have the drug class name listed and then no updates in red. So for the antibiotics, anti-infective agents, there's no updates. For the antidepressant classes, we have the alpha-2 receptor antagonists, the MAOYs, the norepinephrine dopamine reuptake inhibitors, the SSRIs, the SNRIs, serotonin modulators, and tricyclic agents all have no updates to them. I couldn't find any new products or any updates to the class in general. So I'll go ahead and leave that up there for just a couple of seconds for the committee to look over. Okay. And then moving on, so next we have the anti-diabetics. So the anti-diabetics, the alpha-glucosidase inhibitors, there's no updates. But for the anti-diabetics biguanides, I thought this would just be worth mentioning as far as there's been recalls of metformin ER that have been released, recalls that the FDA has released due to NDMA impurities, and it varies from different manufacturers. So just wanted to put that on your radar if you're not already aware, but it's not really an update, just something I thought worth mentioning. For the anti-diabetics, diabetic other drug class, there were 2 new products that came to the market. So the first one is Baqsimi, which is a glucagon nasal powder. It was approved in July of 2019, and the formulation for that particular glucagon is a dry nasal spray, and it's used for hypoglycemia. The next product is Gvoke, and that is a glucagon injection. And that was came to the market or FDA approved September of 2019. And what makes this product different is that it's already a pre-mixed auto-injector and of course used for hypoglycemia. So those are 2 new products that came to the market in 2019, and they're both glucagon products. Next is the dopamine receptor agonist. There's no updates to that class. And for these drug classes here, we have the meglitidine analogs, sulfonylureas, thiazolidinediones, chelating agents, antifungals, injectable, oral, and vaginal. There's no updates to those classes as well. So I'll go ahead and pause for a couple of seconds. Okay, so moving on, next we have the anti-hyperlipidemics, and this is the miscellaneous class. So in December of 2019, there was a label expansion for Vascepa, which is icosapent ethyl. And the label expansion was now for a new indication for use as an adjunct to maximally tolerated statin therapy to reduce the risk of myocardial infarction, stroke, coronary revascularization, and unstable angina requiring hospitalization in adults with elevated triglyceride levels 150 or higher. And patients must have established cardiovascular disease or diabetes mellitus and 2 or more additional risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So that has been added now to the Vascepa label for the indication. And other updates that we have in this class as well is there was a new product that came to the market in February of 2020, and that is called Nexlizet. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but it is bempedoic acid and ezetimibe in a combination pill. So it combines a ACL inhibitor plus a cholesterol absorption inhibitor in one. And it is indicated as an adjunct to diet and maximally tolerated statin therapy for adults with heterozygous familial hypercholesterolemia or established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease who require additional lowering of LDLs. So update to those two. So moving on, for the rest of these anti-hyperlipidemics and antihypertensives, there's really no updates to the bile acid sequestrants, fibric acid derivatives, HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, or the statins and their combination, ACE inhibitors, ARBs, ARBs, and anti-androgenergic combinations. There's no updates that I could find for these classes. So I'll leave that up for a couple of seconds. Okay, so moving on, we have some more antihypertensives. So we have the anti-androgenergics, beta blocker combinations and beta blockers, and the calcium channel combinations. There's no updates to those, but there is one update to the calcium channel blockers class, and these are just the single agent regimens in this class. There is a new calcium channel blocker that came out or was FDA approved December of 2019, and it is called Conjupri, or lev-amlodipine maleate. It is indicated for the treatment of hypertension in adults and pediatric patients 6 years and older. So there's new calcium channel blocker that has been FDA approved. So next we have the antihypertensives other and the vasodilators. There's no updates to that class or those classes. For the antiparasitics amebicides, there's no updates that I could find. For the antiparasitics antihelmintics, there is a new product that was FDA approved in February 2019, and it is called Egaten. I apologize if I pronounce that incorrectly, but it is the generic or the active ingredient name is triclobendazole. And this particular medication is indicated for the treatment of fascioliasis in patients 6 years of age and older. And then in the anti-malarials drug class, there's no updates as well. So next, we have the anti-protozoal agents. And there was a new product that was FDA approved in August of 2020, and that is called Lampit or nifurtimox. It is indicated for pediatric patients, so from birth to less than 18 years old, so birth to 18 years old, and weighing at least 2.5 kilograms. It is indicated for the treatment of Chagas disease caused by Trypanosoma cruzi. So that's a new product that has come to the market. For the scabicides and pediculides, there's no updates. And then moving on now to the anti-Parkinson agents, the anticholinergics, there's no updates that I could find for that class. So moving on to the COMT inhibitors, there was a new product that came to the market called Ongentys or opicapone, and that was in April of 2020. And this particular medication is indicated as an adjunctive treatment to carbidopa levodopa in patients with Parkinson's disease experiencing off episodes. Okay, so moving on, we have the antipsychotics, antivirals, and some asthma and COPD agents that are listed here on this slide. As you can see, there's no updates to these classes. So the anti-manic agents, first generation antipsychotics, CMV agents, hepatitis B agents, herpes agents, RSV agents, and then moving on to asthma and COPD, we have the long-acting beta agonist and the oral beta agonist. There's no updates to these classes. So I'll pause for just a couple of seconds to let the committee review the slide. Okay, so moving on. For the short-acting beta agonist, there's no updates to that class. There was an update, not necessarily to the class, but there was a box warning that the FDA released for leukotriene modifiers, specifically montelukast, and that was in March of 2020. So the FDA is now requiring box warnings to be added to prescribing information to describe seriously mental health side effects for Singulair or montelukast. So it's recommended now, they have a recommendation to be reserved to treat allergic rhinitis in patients who are not treated effectively or cannot tolerate other allergic medications. And for this particular FDA warning, it didn't look like it was applied to the class in general, so all leukotriene modifiers, so zarfalucast or xylitol. I couldn't find anything on the FDA website. So as of today, it looks like that warning is only applied to montelukast right now. And then for the xanthines, for asthma and COPD agents, there's no updates. And then for these bone density regulators, the calcitonins and the parathyroid hormone derivatives, there's no updates to those classes as well. So moving on, for some of these cardiovascular agents and contraceptives and the bisphosphonates, there's no updates there. So no updates to nitrates, the anti-anginal agents, other antiarrhythmics, cardioglycosides, peripheral vasodilators, oral, phosphodiesterase inhibitors, and combination contraceptives oral. There's no updates to those classes. So I'll take a couple of seconds to pause. Okay, moving on, there's some more contraceptives that we have for the AHPDL. So we have the biphasic oral, the continuous oral, combination contraceptives, oral extended cycle, and oral triphasic combination contraceptives. There's no updates to any of those classes. Okay, so moving on, we do have an update in the combination contraceptives transdermal. So there is a new product that was FDA approved in February of 2020, and that product is called Twerla. So that one is a levonorgestrel ethinyl estradiol transdermal patch. And this actually was approved as a new dosage form. So there is levonorgestrel ethinyl estradiol oral tablets that you can take, but now there's a patch. Hence, that's why this product is now FDA approved as of recently. For the combination contraceptives vaginal, the copper contraceptives, emergency contraceptives, non-pharmaceutical, progestin contraceptives, implants, there's no updates to those classes. So moving on, we have a couple of updates to some of these classes here. So the progestin contraceptives injectable, there's no updates there. For the progestin contraceptives IUD, there was an expanded label indication for Liletta, which is levonorgestrel. So in October 2019, the FDA approved a supplemental NDA to extend the use of Liletta for up to 6 years. I believe previously it was only 3 years, so now it can, the use is extended for 6 years. And for the progestin contraceptives oral, there is a new product that came out in May of 2019 called Slind or drospirenone. And this product is a little different than the other ones on the market in that it's the only progestin pill with a 24-hour intake window, and there's 24 active and 4 inactive dosing or pills in the pack. So typically with some of these progestin or mini pills, you have to take it within a certain amount of time. But now the window for this particular medication is 24 hours that you can take it instead of the narrower window. And now this particular product has 4 inactive pills in the regimen compared to some of the other progestins, which are just continuous throughout the whole pack. So that's a new contraceptive that has come out. So next we have some corticosteroids, cough and cold, and dermatologics. For the glucocorticosteroid combinations, mineral corticoids, there's no updates to those classes, no updates to the antitussives, expectorants, decongestants, and miscellaneous cough and cold products. And for acne products oral, acne products topical, and agents for genital and perianal warts, there's no updates for any of those classes that I could find. Okay, so next, there was a new product that was approved in December of 2020 for the anti-neoplastic or pre-malignant lesion agents topical drug class, and that new product is, I apologize if I pronounce this incorrectly, Klisyri or tirbanibulin, and this product is a microtubule inhibitor, and it is indicated for actinic keratosis on the face or scalp. So this was fairly recent, just in 2020, December. But for these other dermatologic drug classes, for the antipyretics topical, oral, anti-psoriatics oral topical, anti-seborrheic products, and burn products, there's no updates to those drug classes. So next, the emollients and cherolytic agents, enzymes topical, immunomodulating agents topical, keratolytic antimitotic agents. There's no updates to those drug classes. There is a new product that came to market in the rosacea agent drug class, and this particular product is called Zilxi, and it is a minocycline topical foam. It was approved in May of 2020, and it is a tetracycline topical foam, and it is indicated for the treatment of inflammatory lesions of rosacea in adults. And then moving on to the topical steroids, high potency, there's no updates to that drug class. So moving on, we have the other topical steroids. So we have the low potency, medium potency, very high potency, no updates to those drug classes. Wound care products, growth factor agents, no updates. Pancreatic enzymes, I could not find any updates. And then for the diuretics, we have the carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, diuretic combinations, and loop diuretics. There's no updates to those classes as well. So I'll pause. Okay, so next, excuse me. So we have some more classes with no updates. So we have the potassium sparing diuretics, thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics, and then we move into the endocrine and metabolic agents drug classes. So for the adenosine deaminase SCID treatment agents, injectable, no updates. Anabolic steroids, oral, no updates. Androgens, other. Antithyroid agents and calcimimetic agents, oral. There's no updates to those classes as well. So I'll go ahead and pause. Okay. And then some more endocrine and metabolic agents. So we have the carnitine replenisher agents, oral, the corticotropin, estrogen, various estrogen and androgen, progestin, selective estrogen receptor modulator combinations. There's no updates to those classes as well. So not much going on with some of these archived classes. Next, we have some more endocrine and metabolic agents. We have various estrogen products. So we have injectable, oral, topical, and vaginal. This should be vaginal, I apologize. And then we have the growth hormone receptor antagonists. There's no updates to those products or those drug classes. Oh, sorry, apologize. Okay, moving on. Some more endocrine and metabolic agents. So the hypophosphatasia agents, injectable, oxytocics, PKU agents, both injectable and oral, and posterior pituitary hormones, both nasal and oral. There's no updates to those classes as well. Pause for a second. Okay. And we have the progesterone receptor antagonist, progesterone's vaginal, prolactin inhibitors, thyroid hormone oral, and tripeptidyl peptidase 1 deficiency agents. There's no updates to those classes. So next, we have the X-linked hypophosphatemia agents. There's no updates there. We do have a couple of updates in these gastrointestinal agents. So for the H2 antagonists, the FDA requested withdrawal of all prescription and OTC ranitidine products from the market due to NDMA impurities. So I believe you can't even find any ranitidine products out on the market. And that was requested April of 2020. And so next is the proton pump inhibitors. There's no updates there. And for the antidiarrheal agents, there was just something I thought would be worth noting. For Imodium specifically, brand name, the FDA approved changes to packaging for the name brand Imodium or loperamide, which limits the carton to no more than 48 milligrams of loperamide and requires the tablets and capsules to be packaged individually to help address abuse and misuse of loperamide. And that was in September of 2019. I didn't see anything specifically on generics. When I did look on the FDA website, they only really mentioned brand name Imodium. So I'm not quite sure if it applies to the generic OTC products that are out there, but at least for brand name Imodium, there is changes to the packaging, it looks like. So next we have gastrointestinal agents and genitourinary agents. So we have gallstone solubilizing agents, laxatives, other, and antacids. There's no updates there. And then for these miscellaneous genitourinary agents, so the alkalinizers, urinary analgesics, urinary anti-infectives, there's no updates. And then for the acidifiers, there's no updates as well. So I'll go ahead and pause. Okay, moving on. There is an update to Procysbi, which is in the cystinosis agents, and that's cysteamine bitartrate. And there was an update February of 2020. So now there's a new delayed release oral granule formulation that comes in packets for adults and children, and they can use it in 1 year of age and older for Procysbi. So that's new as of recently, almost a year ago. We have no updates to the interstitial cystitis agents, urinary stone agents, but there is an update to the H. pylori antibiotics. So there was a new product that came out in November of 2019 called Talicia, and it is a omeprazole, amoxicillin, and rifabutin product all in one. So it's composed of a proton pump inhibitor, penicillin antibacterial, and rifamycin antibacterial, and the name's kind of indicative of what it's used for. It's indicated for the treatment of H. pylori infection in adults. So another option for H. pylori treatment. And then for the GI ulcer agents, miscellaneous, there's no updates to that class that I could find. Okay, so moving on to the gout agents, there was an update to Uloric or febuxostat, and that was in February of 2019. So the FDA is now requiring a box warning to be added to Uloric products, so to the prescribing information for increased risk of death. So that's now included on the label.
And for the hematological agents other, there's no updates. There was quite a bit of updates to some products and new products that came to market for the anti-hemophilic products. So I'll go through those a little bit. So there is a new expanded label indication for this product, Zinta, and I apologize if I pronounce that incorrectly, but it is an anti-hemophilic factor recombinant. So the label now includes the new indication of routine prophylaxis to reduce the frequency of bleeding episodes in children and adults with hemophilia A. So that's new to that product as of August. And there was a new product that was FDA approved in February of 2019 called Esperoct. And that is a anti-hemophilic factor recombinant as well. It is a coagulation factor 8 concentrate, and it has a various amount of indications. So it's indicated for use in adults and children with hemophilia A and these are the various indications. So on-demand treatment and control of bleeding episodes, perioperative management of bleeding. This should be routine, I apologize. Routine prophylaxis to reduce the frequency of bleeding episodes. However, this particular product is not indicated for the treatment of von Willebrand disease. Just wanted to note that. We have a couple more updates to some of these anti-hemophilic products. So Wiley, which is an anti-hemophilic factor 8 von Willebrand factor. On October 2019, there is now an expanded label indication to include routine prophylaxis to reduce the frequency of bleeding episodes and on-demand treatment and control of bleeding episodes. So that's been added to that product. There is a new product that came to market April 2020 called 7-Fact, and that is a coagulation factor 7A. It's a coagulation factor 7A concentrate, and it is indicated for the treatment and control of bleeding episodes in adults and adolescents 12 years of age and older with hemophilia A and B with inhibitors. So new product there. There was an expanded label indication for Ixinity. Apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. That is a coagulation factor 9 recombinant. As of September 2020, there is a new indication for routine prophylaxis to reduce the frequency of bleeding episodes in adults and adolescents 12 years of age and older with hemophilia B. So a couple new expanded label indications and new products that have come to market. So next, I just wanted to make a note for Soliris. I believe what's published online is a little bit different. I did update this slide with the indications because I did find that there were numerous indications, so I listed them here in the update. So for the complement inhibitors for the hematologic agents, we have Soliris, eculizumab, and this was approved in June of 2019. It is a complement inhibitor, and what I've updated in this slide compared to what's posted online is the indications. So these are all the indications for this particular product. So neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorder, who are anti-aquaporin antibody positive, atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome to inhibitory complement mediated thrombotic microangiopathy, and I apologize for the spelling there, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria to reduce hemolysis, and generalized myasthenia gravis in adult patients who are positive for anti-acetylcholine antibody. That was a mouthful, but these are the indications for that product, or the various indications for that product. So moving on to some of these hematological and hematopoietic agents. So platelet aggregation inhibitors, there's no updates. Cobalamins, folic acid and iron combinations and single agent products, there's no updates to those products. So moving on, we have hemostatics. So we have the systemic injectable and systemic oral. No updates to those products. There was a new product that came out last month.
in the cyclosporine analogs oral, and I believe it's called Lupicinus. I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly, but it is a voclosporin. This was just approved in January of 2021, so very recently. It is a calcineurin inhibitor immunosuppressant, and it is indicated for treatment of adult patients with active lupus nephritis. So very, very new within the last month. Then we have these immunosuppressive agents, the inosine monophosphate dehydrogenase inhibitors, oral and macrolide immunosuppressants. There's no updates to those classes. Next, we have these immunosuppressive agents, monoclonal antibodies. So Enspring, satralizumab is the name of that product. It was FDA approved in August of 2020. It is an interleukin 6 IL-6 receptor antagonist, and it is indicated for the treatment of neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorder. Same thing as kind of the Soliris in adults who are anti-aquaporin 4 antibody positive. And then moving on to these immunosuppressive purine analogs, migraine agents, ergot derivatives, and other, no updates to those classes. And then we have the mineral and electrolytes classes, so calcium and fluoride oral agents, no updates to those classes either. So next we have various other classes. So we have mineral and electrolytes, miscellaneous mouth, throat, and dental agents, and then moving on to musculoskeletal therapy agents. So for phosphate, oral, potassium, chelating agents, oral, artificial saliva, saliva stimulants, skeletal muscle relaxants, there's no updates to those classes. I'll pause for a second. Okay, so moving on, there is a new product that came to the market in the neurological agents other drug class. So we have Xywave, I believe it's pronounced, and what it is a calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium oxybate product. It was FDA approved in July of 2020. It is a central nervous system depressant, and it's indicated for cataplexy and excessive daytime sleepiness in patients 7 years of age and older with narcolepsy. So fairly new product that just came out. And for these neurological agents, transthyretin amyloidosis agents, ALS agents, both the benzothiazoles and miscellaneous agents, there's no updates. And then we move on to the oncology agents, so anti-neoplastic progestins oral, there's no updates to those classes. So moving on, we have some more oncology agents, and then we move into the ophthalmic agents. So the aromatase inhibitors oral, the autologous cellular immunotherapy, chemotherapy rescue antidote agents, so urinary tract protective agents oral, folic acid antagonist rescue agents oral, the radiopharmaceuticals, there's no updates to those classes. And then for the ophthalmic agents, the anti-allergic products, there's no updates to that class. I'll pause for a second. Okay, so moving on. Oh, apologize, my computer is wanting me to restart. Goodness. So we have the ophthalmic agents, antibiotics, sulfonamides, antibiotic steroid combinations, antifungals, antivirals, artificial tears and lubricants, and the cycloplegic mydriatics. There's no updates to those classes as well. I'll pause for a second. So next we do have a new product that came out in August of 2020 to the cystinosis agents, and that new product is Cystadrops or cysteamine. It got approval, like I said, in August of 2020. It is a cysteine depleting agent, and it is indicated for the treatment of corneal cysteine crystal deposits in adults and children with cystinosis. And what makes this product different, I believe the other product that's in this class is it's another cysteamine product. It's not Cystadrops, but what varies, I believe they have the same active ingredient, but what's different with this product is it has 4 times per day dosing, whereas the other product has dosing where you use it every waking hour. So instead of having to put drops in every hour, now the patient can do 4 times a day dosing for this Cystadrops product. And then for these decongestants, gene therapy, local anesthetics, and NSAID ophthalmic agents, there's no updates to those classes as well. So moving on, we have a couple more agents. So we have otic agents, respiratory agents, and sleep disorder agents. Really no updates for any of these classes. So for the ophthalmic steroids, the otic analgesic combinations, otic anti-infectives, miscellaneous otic steroids, alpha proteinase inhibitors, no updates to the barbiturate hypnotics and the benzodiazepine hypnotics. No updates there. And I apologize, I actually repeated benzodiazepine hypnotics on this slide and the other slide. And I apologize, I take it back. There is one update, which I mentioned last time when I presented the archive classes for the benzodiazepines. In September of 2020, the FDA is now requiring a boxed warning for all benzodiazepines. So the box warning is going to be updated to describe the risk of abuse, misuse, addiction, physical dependence, and withdrawal reactions with benzodiazepines. So then now we have the smoking deterrents, the nicotine replacement products, substance use disorder, alcohol deterrents, and then we have all these vitamin products. So we have B complex, multivitamins, and the vitamins A, D, and C. No updates to those products. And it looks like this is the last slide, which I went through this a lot quicker than I thought. So we have the prenatal vitamins, vitamin B1 and vitamin B6 drug classes. There are no updates to these classes. So somehow I was able to get through all 216 or 15 classes that we have left for archiving in 30 minutes. I'll go ahead and pause here if the committee has any questions.
Marissa, it's Alex Parker. Can you just remind me again what happens once these classes are archived?
Yeah, so Dr. Park, once we get the motion to archive these drug classes, so these classes will only be kind of represented every year or annually in a big lump, kind of how I did it in this presentation. So it's not going to be an in-depth drug class review that's like what Umang does or what we did previously this morning, but they'll just be brought back every year. And then if there's any updates, then I'll go ahead and note them in the updates when I'm going through it. But that's essentially kind of what happens when you guys approve to archive these classes.
Got it, thank you. And how do you guys decide which classes get eligible to fall into this large archiving bucket?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the cystic fibrosis presentation, that there wasn't much change there, but we did have a presentation on that. So yeah.
Yeah, so the kind of criteria that we go through when we're deciding to archive them is like going through, so we have to go through pretty much all what we did was we went through all 430 something drug classes individually and looked at all the products that are in the class. And if we saw that pretty much the whole class is like largely generic, we decided that that's probably a good class to archive because there's no new products that have come out. It's been generic for how many years. And then also if there's not really any movement that happens in the class as far as new products that have come to market. So maybe there might be like 1 or 2 products, or if it's kind of a class that's not, I don't want to say a hot topic, but it's not very, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, I guess kind of like it's not kind of like a high priority class, or not, doesn't really have, I would say, pretty expensive products that we would want to look at regularly. So that's kind of the criteria that we used when we were going through these archive classes.
Thank you, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions that I might be able to answer? And I'm also open to any feedback that the committee might have as far as going through these archive classes again. You know, if ways that we can improve the presentation for you all. And also one thing is that for these archive classes, it's not classes that Magellan is actively managing. So when I say that, the classes that we usually do a regular drug class review are involved or are part of our TOPS agreement that we have with Magellan. So Magellan is actively managing those classes with rebates. So a lot of these archive drug classes as well don't have any available rebates with them. So that was also another criteria for archiving or presenting it for archiving.
Marissa, Alex Park here, just one more question. Do any of the classes you're proposing to archive have an active Apple Health policy discussion that's pending from a prior meeting? I'm just recalling some classes, such as the ALS drugs and others that we that are sort of hotter topics. I can't remember if those are part of this or not.
So that's actually something that I'm actively working on right now, and it's a pretty intensive process. So one of my plans is to go through all of the 430 something drug classes that we have on the AHPDL and figure out which classes don't have policies for them. But to kind of go back to what you say, we do still create policies even for these archive classes. I haven't identified exactly which products will need policies yet. I'm actively doing that now, but we will be presenting them to the committee once I identify and kind of figure out which ones we want to bring to the board in what time frames to you guys. So to answer your question, we do create clinical policies for these archive drug classes. I just have not identified them yet, which I am in the process of doing.
Thank you, that's reassuring to know. So in other words, if we were to archive these, there would still be some background work that you're doing to ensure that the drugs are being looked at thoughtfully. The pathway that patients and providers follow. So yeah, I appreciate that reassurance. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. We would still definitely want you, the committee, to look at these policies. Even though they're archived, we would still want you guys to review them as we create them. So you can imagine with 430 something odd drug classes, there's probably a lot of outstanding products out there that don't have policies yet. So I am working and trying my hardest to get those identified, and hopefully we can get them made. It'll be a process that is going to be long along with the drug classes that we do review. But yes, you can expect to see some coming your way. Any other additional questions or feedback from the DUR board on the archive drug classes? I went through them a lot quicker than I was anticipating. So
Marissa, this is Ginny. I just wanted to say thanks. I thought it was actually pretty efficient, and I appreciated the, the way that you were able to pull out the changes. So from my experience, it was helpful and didn't drag on too long. So thank you.
Great. So if there's no additional feedback from the DUR board, I do have a motion for them. So I'll go ahead and put up the recommendation and the motion. So then for the DUR board, you guys can look over it and decide if you want to make these eligible for archiving.
Marissa, this is Ginny again. I just, as a point of clarification, were your 40 slides of archived drug classes, is that the bulk of our agenda for this morning, or for the totality of the archived drug classes that we're supposed to review today?
It was pretty much the totality of all of the archived drug classes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see that there were 2 stakeholders scheduled.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I didn't know if they were on. I mean, it's I'll just jump ahead unless Lita wants to pop in. I know that.
Hi, this is Lita. We have one stakeholder for the archived classes, and then we have one for the policy.
Okay.
I did see Dylan is on. I'm going to unmute Dylan now. I see you're self-muted as well. Dylan Bassett from Pierre Faber Pharmaceuticals. If you would still like to speak now. Okay, he must be doing something else. I'll send him a chat message just to see if I can get his attention.
While we're waiting for the stakeholder, can I ask a question, Ginny and Marissa, about this archiving process?
Sure, Alex. I know I probably won't know the answer, but I bet Marissa.
Sure. This is Marissa, sure.
Well, the agenda says this is supposed to go through 2:10 p.m. this afternoon. Did we finish all of the archiving just now that was supposed to go through 2:10?
Hi, this is Marissa. Yeah, it looks like we actually went through all of them.
Okay. And did you get what you needed from us? I have a little anxiety that this much time was blocked, and I just worry that we're missing something on this process. So just want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence on this.
Hi, Chris, this is Donna. I think this is the first time we've done this, and it was 100 and some classes, and we just overestimated how long it was going to take. So I don't think that we really missed anything. Once we get through the motion and the recommendation, or the recommendation and the motion, then we'll have what we need for this particular topic, and we'll know to better estimate time the next time we bring these back for you to review.
Yeah, this is Marissa. I apologize. I definitely overestimated how long it would take to go through these archive classes. So that was a fault on my part. I apologize.
Not a bad thing to be ahead of schedule. We'll take that.
What I was wondering, do we have Dylan yet, Lita?
He has not replied.
Okay.
So,
can we just maybe just move forward with the recommendation and motion, and then what I would suggest is, can we review the policy before lunch and just quit early?
This is Ginny. I'm all for that. I'm ready to, yeah.
Hi, this is Marissa. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and proceed with the motion.
Yes, Marissa. Yeah, go ahead and move to the motion and take a look at that, and then we'll look at that last policy and that motion before lunch.
Sounds good.
Well, this is Susan Flattabo. I move that all drug classes listed on slides 2 through 40 are eligible for archiving at the discretion of HCA. Products in these drug classes may require prior authorization to determine medical necessity. All non-preferred products require a trial of 2 preferred products with the same indication before a non-preferred drug will be authorized unless contraindicated, not clinically appropriate, or only one product is preferred.
This is Alex Park. I second that motion.
This is Ginny Bucola. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And the motion carries. And that will take us back to Marissa to review the policy on pulmonary hypertension agents.
Okay, sorry, this is Marissa. Let me just go ahead and pull up the policy. I'll just pause my screen for just a second.
This is Lita Vasquez. I am contacting the stakeholder for pulmonary hypertension agents to see if she can log in early.
Okay.
Apologize, I'm just loading up the policy, the form, and the motion, so just bear with me. Okay, so I believe I have everything loaded up. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so I will be going through the pulmonary hypertension agents policy. We did present this policy, or I presented this policy in December, but there was some feedback from the committee to update the policy, so it was not approved, so I'm presenting it again today. So just to kind of give you some background again on this policy, it is an annual update of, oh, I'm sorry, let me present my screen or show my camera. There we go. Sorry about that. So this is an annual update of the current policy, which we implemented in August of 2018. And the updates that were made to this policy was to kind of make the criteria a little bit more specific. So right now, the current criteria that we have online, or that we have implemented from August of 2018, is a little broad. So we've incorporated some more kind of classification that we've included the World Health Organization classifications, and we've separated the chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. So now it's kind of combined into this criteria, just for some background, because it was presented in December. So just to kind of go through the criteria. So I did rearrange the criteria a little bit compared to what you saw in December. So for criteria 1, now we have it where the patient must have either A or B, so one of the following. So I just kind of reordered this criteria here. So now the WHO groups 3 or 4 is listed in A. But I didn't change any of the criteria, so it's still the same. in which general treatment measures have failed and pulmonary hypertension is thought to be unrelated to underlying lung disease. Or now we have for B, the pulmonary arterial hypertension diagnosis, WHO group 1 is now for 1B. And then the criteria 1, documentation of PAH, WHO functional class 2, 3, or 4 has not changed. I did reframe criteria 2 to put a little bit more emphasis on that the patient has tried or failed a calcium channel blocker. So previously it was that the acute vasoreactivity testing was like where number 2 would be, but now I think rearranging it where B2 is that we require a trial and failure of a CCB, unless of course it's contraindicated or there's intolerance for the patient. So more emphasis on trying and failing a calcium channel blocker rather than the purpose of the acute vasoreactivity testing, because the acute vasoreactivity testing is more so giving us an indication on who can use a CCB compared to who can't. So that's just been rearranged to make it a little bit more clearer. But the criteria for the ABT or what I've listed I haven't changed any of that. I didn't update that. For number 2, this has stayed the same as well from what you've previously seen. So the requested therapy is not for any of the following. So a combination of a phosphodiesterase inhibitor and soluble guanylate cyclase stimulator, or a combination of selexipag and parenteral prostanoid. That's still the same. I think what really varies now with what you saw in December compared to today was we did have in these criteria 1 through 5, there was for non-preferred agents, it was that they had to try a preferred agent that was listed in the criteria. And I think that's what was causing a lot of the confusion, because the feedback that we got from the committee was to create a pathway for how a patient could get a preferred agent. So I actually removed that non-preferred criteria that was listed here. And I think that alleviates the confusion that it might have caused. So now it's just if they are currently established on a requested therapy or if they're requesting for selexipag specifically. These are still the same, but just going to go through it. For uptravi or selexipag, there's history of failure, contraindication, or intolerance to an endothelin receptor antagonist. It's prescribed by or in consultation with a specialist in cardiology or pulmonology. So essentially, as long as a patient meets all the criteria that's listed here in 1 through 5, if it's applicable to them, then they are eligible to get the preferred agent for this particular policy. I didn't change anything as far as the approval, so it's still for 12 months for the initial approval. And then we have this updated statement that I believe was still there even in December for if all criteria are not met, but there are documented medically necessary circumstances based on the professional judgment of the clinical reviewer, requests may be approved on a case-by-case basis up to the initial authorization duration. That is still there. I didn't change any of the reauthorization criteria, so that is still the same. So as long as, so medication used for the treatment of pulmonary hypertension may be reauthorized when documentation of response. So an example is disease stability or mild progression indicated by a slowing of decline using the WHO functional class scale is provided. So if all of the above criteria are met, the request will be approved for another 12 months. And then we have kind of that blanket statement here for the reauthorization duration as well, where it's reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Case-by-case basis if it's clinically necessary by the reviewer. And I didn't change any of this criteria here below for the coding or the dosage and quantity limits, so that's pretty much the same. And these are just the appendices here with the different clinical classifications and then the functional classifications of pulmonary hypertension. So I'll go ahead and move over to the form. So this is the updated form that would go with the pulmonary hypertension policy. So here, this will just help guide the providers, and hopefully this makes a little bit more sense now we have updated it. So the first question is asking, is this for continuation of therapy, yes or no? And then this right here, if yes, is there documentation supporting disease stability, yes or no? That's for pretty much for the re-auth criteria. And then for 2, 3, and 4, I don't believe anything has changed for these. I think we just removed, I think, the non-preferred criteria that we had previously. So now it's just asking for the diagnosis. Has the patient tried a calcium channel blocker, yes or no? If not, was it due to one of the following? And then the provider would check off why they could not use one, or why, or kind of what happened once they tried one. And then, will the requested therapy be used in combination with any of the following, which was listed in the criteria? And then for Uptravi, we do have the history, contraindication, history of failure, contraindication, or intolerance to the ERA. And then, of course, asking for specialty. But of course, with these requests, we would require chart notes. So we would want to take a look at those if we get this in as a request. So I'll go ahead and pause here for any questions from the committee, whether that be the policy or the form.
Thanks, Marissa. Jenny, want to make space for any questions, and also wonder if Lita has been able to get in touch with Stephanie Yamamoto.
Yes, this is Lita. She has logged in.
Okay.
Stephanie, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi there. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, Stephanie, thanks. Can you just give us your name and your affiliation, and you'll have 3 minutes to share.
Will do. Thank you so much for your flexibility as well. And thanks for the heads up, Lita. My name is Stephanie Yamamoto. I am a pharmacist with Janssen Scientific Affairs, and I'm speaking on behalf of OpSummit, or macitentan. OpSummit is an endothelin receptor antagonist, or an ERA, indicated for the treatment of pulmonary arterial hypertension, PAH WHO Group 1, to reduce the risks of disease progression and hospitalization for PAH. Effectiveness was established in a long-term study called Seraphin in PAH patients with predominantly WHO functional class 2 and 3 symptoms, treated for an average of 2 years. Patients had idiopathic and heritable PAH, PAH caused by connective tissue disorders, as well as PAH caused by congenital heart disease with repaired shunts. And the primary endpoint was time to the first occurrence of death or a significant morbidity event. And a statistically significant risk reduction was seen for OpSummit 10 milligrams versus placebo. A key secondary endpoint in Seraphin was death due to PAH or PAH-related hospitalization, and there was a 50% risk reduction for OpSummit versus placebo. PAH is a severe, complex, and often deadly disease, and the clinical and economic burden of PAH goes beyond pharmacy costs. Treatment strategy involves appropriate diagnosis, initial risk assessment, as well as specialized clinical expertise, and access to as many options for individualized patient care as needed. The European Society of Cardiology and European Respiratory Society, or the ESC guidelines, list macitentan added to sildenafil as a class 1B recommendation for sequential combination therapy for WHO functional class 2 and 3 patients. And we respectfully ask the committee to add OpSummit to the preferred drug list for Washingtonians. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, then Marissa, can you take us to the motion?
Hi, Jenny. Yeah, let me go ahead and pull it up. Okay, you should be able to see it there.
Yeah, I can see it.
Marissa, it's Alex Park here. Can I ask something about number 3 on the policy?
Hi, Dr. Park. Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, go ahead.
We are saying that the patient needs to be already established on the therapy that they're requesting. Is that right?
No. So for number 3, that's addressing the issue of if a patient is already established on pulmonary hypertension agent, because I know that there can be consequences if they abruptly stop or, I think switch. So that's just addressing if they are already on it, then they would meet that criteria. So it would be or. So as long as they're not requesting for this, or if they're already established on it, then that would be grounds for criteria for them to be approved for it. Does that make sense?
Okay. I didn't read it that way, but it makes sense the way you explain it. Okay.
This is Leah Marquette. I move that the Apple Health Medicaid program implement the clinical criteria listed on policy 40.12.00-2 as recommended.
This is Diane Schwelke. I second.
This is Jenny Bucola. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? That motion carries. And that takes us to the end of today's agenda. Lita, is there anything else that we need to take care of while we're together as a committee?
Hi, this is Lita. No, that is everything that was scheduled for today. So I really appreciate all your time.
Well, wishing Connie good luck and farewell.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, stay in touch, Connie. All right, so I officially then adjourn the DUR review board, and we'll see you all next in April.
Great, thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.